All right, I want to talk a little bit about our current weather situation. Um, so it is February 3rd today. We're here in Albuquerque. It is 65 degrees. And this has been pretty common, I think, across the spectrum for the winter, fall, spring. We have had above average temperatures. We've had a really temperate kind of climate across the board. I think not only for New Mexico, but I think for the United States. And what that is translated into in kind of a big way is we have seen really healthy numbers coming out for the year for bees. And so everybody right now that's shipping bees to California, for the most part, is seeing some pretty healthy numbers. The hive populations are pretty strong. And here in New Mexico, we're no different. Our loss for the year has been really, really small, which is good. And where we're at now with February 3rd and we're 65, and don't get me wrong, there's cold weather still to come, but this has been the trend. Less stress on the colonies. Everybody's bees that I've talked to have done really, really well. So we're not alone in this. I think we've seen this across the country. So for us here in New Mexico, we see our first pollination event, or pollen flow as I call it. We see that in February, and it's usually towards the end of February. But I think this year my prediction and what we're banking off of is going to be around the 15th of February, I think, is when we're going to see our elms pop. And the elm, the Chinese elm, is the first pollination source for the year, hands down. It's before dandelions and any other flowering plant. The first major source of pollen in the Rio Grande Valley, anyway, is going to be that Chinese elm. That lasts usually somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks. So if we see that on the 15th of February, that's going to go into probably the end of February, and then we go back into a dearth. It depends on how long that dearth depends on whether or not we stay warm and if we get any meaningful moisture. If we get some decent moisture and we stay somewhat warm, that can carry us pretty quickly into some of the Bradford pear and some of the flowering fruit trees, and definitely some of the London rocket, some of the different weeds that produce flower and pollen. But for us as beekeepers, it's really important to recognize that, hey, look, we have this little window of pollen that stimulates brood and starts to kick off our season, but then we go into this dearth. As a beekeeper, if you can carry that on through substitute feeding of pollen patties, open feeding of pollen powder, and then feeding a sugar substitute, some sort of liquid feed, that really is the key. That's what you have to look out for. That's what we have to kind of start to do, is get our bees ready for that. So that first initial kind of influx of pollen is set up here in the next couple of weeks, especially if the weather stays warm. And again, I've got no reason to believe that we're not on that trajectory based on the historical data for the fall and spring so far. I'm not saying we're not going to get cold, but my point is, I think that we are kind of going to come into a more milder, into a warming trend as we move into February and March. A little earlier, I think about 15 days earlier than what we would normally see things transpire. So anyway, that's kind of what we're looking out for and what we're doing. We're going to be putting pollen patties on. The bees aren't ready to take liquid feed just yet. They're still kind of shut down, but if we have several days in the upper 50s and low 60s, absolutely we should probably start looking at that liquid feed towards the end of February, as that pollen source starts to diminish from those elms.